I am so pleased to welcome you back to this afternoon. I am grateful to welcome Dr. Joan Roughgarden, who is our featured guest distinguished scientist, and look forward to continuing the learning conversation.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to meet you all. I'm learning a lot. I honestly don't know much psychology, and so every little bit that I learn is something is a welcome addition. So you saw then the movie, which gives you a sort of first-hand view of a lot of the diversity. The purpose of this lecture is to discuss how to explain diversity in sexual reproduction. And I wouldn't normally give a lecture like this to a general audience, but Kent assured me that you would be interested. And we'll see about that. It's too late.
She knows triangles already.
Yeah, I just learned triangles. I think I may be squaring one out. We'll see what happens. Okay, well, let's go for it. In 1871, Charles Darwin formulated a universal biological theory of sex roles. He was concerned with traits like the peacock's tail and the deer's antlers, called male ornaments, which seemed to have no importance for improving survival. Instead, he turned to the role such traits might have in mating. Concerning the peacock's tail, he wrote, "Many female progenitors of the peacock must have, by the continued preference of the most beautiful males, rendered the peacock the most splendid of living birds." He envisioned antlers as weapons used in male-male combat, with the winner securing access to females. Although male-male combat might circumvent female choice by limiting it only to victors, females were assumed to prefer the winners because the winners were the best of the males. Thus, female preference for victorious males caused males to become, quote, more vigorous and well-armed, just as man can improve the breed of his gamecocks by selection of those birds which are most victorious in the cockpit. The peacock's tail and the deer's antlers were emblematic of male-female social relations generally. Darwin wrote, "Males of almost all animals have stronger passions than females, and the female, with the rarest of exceptions, is less eager than the male. She is coy." The phrases "almost all" and "with the rarest of exceptions" show that Darwin was enunciating a theory for all of nature, excepting a few rarities we need not worry about. Darwin's theory of sex roles is called sexual selection. This theory has been expanded into a large system to explain many features of sexual reproduction. The phrase sex-gender system was coined in 1975 by the anthropologist and gender theorist Gail Rubin. Rubin refers to how gender categories emerge from a cultural process that builds on the raw material of biology. How gender is defined becomes the part of social life which is the locus of the oppression of women, of sexual minorities, he says. Male and female, it created them, and it created them heterosexual, unquote. My alternative to sexual selection is social selection. It is about offspring delivery, putting offspring into the next generation. In a nutshell, Sexual selection is about mating, whereas social selection is about offspring delivery. Social selection is natural selection in the context of the social infrastructure within which offspring are produced. The infrastructure includes cooperation as much as competition and involves negotiation as much as winning. Social selection does not extend sexual selection, it is an alternative to sexual selection. I now juxtapose the social and sexual selection explanations for some of the major aspects of sexual reproduction. The table lists 26 specific topics, and I now consider a subset of them in the interests of time. The origin of sexual reproduction. According to the sexual selection system, sexual reproduction evolved from asexual reproduction as a mechanism to cleanse the gene pool of deleterious mutations. According to social selection, sexual reproduction evolved from asexual reproduction to maintain a diverse gene pool in an ever-fluctuating environment. The gene pool of an asexual population overcommits to particular genotypes after a run of environmental circumstances favoring those genotypes. And when the environment changes, the population suffers a crash. This lowers its long-term fitness below that of a corresponding sexual population. The sexual population maintains a more balanced portfolio of genes than an asexual population. At the individual level, the decision to reproduce sexually is a decision to cooperate, to mix genes rather than to clone. According to social selection, sex starts with cooperation. The origin of the sperm-egg binary. The size difference between sperm and egg is used to define male and female. Many sexually reproducing algae have only one size of gamete, and for these species, male and female are not defined. However, most sexually reproducing species have two gamete sizes, one tiny, the sperm, one large, the egg, a condition called anisogamy. The sexual selection system explains the origin of the egg-sperm size binary in terms of a game that the protosperm and protoegg play against each other. Imagine initially that both protosperm and protoegg are the same size. Then the protosperm cheats, becoming a little smaller than the protoegg so that it can make more copies of itself. But a slightly smaller zygote now results that is less viable than the full-size zygote. Therefore, the protoegg responds by increasing its size, restoring zygote viability to its original level. The eggs compensating in this way is better than becoming smaller itself to match the smaller sperm, because the zygote would suffer a deleterious double loss of resources. The sperm and the egg's, quote, best response, unquote, to each other culminates in one gamete becoming nearly as large as the zygote, and the other gamete becoming as tiny as possible. In the sexual selection system, the distinction between male and female arises from a battle. Male and female are created as combatants in a battle of the gametes. The social selection theory starts with an organism who can make both eggs and sperm. The organism must allocate its gametic material to maximize the number of gametic contacts that produce viable zygotes. If both protosperm and protoegg are the same size, only a limited number of them bump into each other in the ocean's water where life began. Instead, The maximum number of contacts occurs when one of the gametes is nearly the zygote size and the other is as small as possible. That is, more gametic contacts occur in seawater when a cloud of large gametes is intersected by a cloud of small gametes than by two clouds of medium-sized gametes intersecting each other. In social selection theory, the gamete size dimorphism exists to maximize the number of contacts between gametes, subject to the constraint that the resultant zygote is big enough to survive. The origin of the male-female binary. The most common body plan among multicellular organisms is for an individual to make both male and female gametes, called hermaphrodism. They may be made at the same time or at different times during an individual life. In contrast, species in which each individual makes only one size of gamete during its life are called dioecious. And in those species, the individuals can be classified as male or female according to the gamete size produced. According to sexual selection, dioecy is the starting point, and hermaphrodism is a specialization for circumstances such as extremely low population density. According to social selection, hermaphrodism is the starting point, and dioecy is a specialization. This stance agrees with the pattern of hermaphroditic body plans being widespread in the oldest animal phyla and classes, such as marine invertebrates, as well as throughout the plant kingdom. Dioecy occurs primarily in the more recent phyla and classes of animals, such as terrestrial arthropods and terrestrial vertebrates. Dioecy exists as a response to ecological conditions in which it's efficient for one body type to be devoted to transporting the gametes, while the other body type remains relatively stationary. Universal sex roles. Given that sperm and egg production take place in specialized bodies, male and female, what do these bodies do? According to sexual selection, males and females conform to near universal templates, which, as Darwin wrote, are that males are passionate and females coy. Today's jargon substitutes the word promiscuous for passionate and constrained for coy, and is typically framed as follows, quote, males spread their genes most effectively by mating promiscuously, whereas female reproductive output is constrained by the metabolic costs of producing eggs or offspring, and thus a female's interests are served more by mate quality than by mate quantity. The Darwinian sex roles are nowhere close to being universal. In fish, for example, species in which one or more parents care for the eggs, the male is likely to be the care provider. Birds often feature biparental care, whereas in mammals, the female usually provides the care. According to social selection, no necessary and universal sex roles exist. What each sex does is subject to negotiation in local circumstances. Any statistical regularity in sex roles reflects a statistical commonness of circumstance. Purpose of reproductive social behavior. According to sexual selection theory, reproductive social behavior comprises a mating system. Within a mating system, natural selection arises from differences in mating success. Particular behaviors are understood by how they contribute to attaining mating success. In a mating system, the females are regarded as a limiting resource for males, and males compete for access and control of mating opportunities. Sexual selection elevates one component of reproduction, namely mating, into an end in itself. According to social selection theory, reproductive social behavior comprises an offspring rearing system. Within an offspring rearing system, natural selection arises from differences in the number of offspring successfully reared. The principal male-female social dynamic is then to negotiate bargains and side payments to arrive at an optimal division of labor to rear the offspring. Female choice. Darwin claimed that the peahen's aesthetic caused peacocks to evolve the most beautiful tails. Today's sexual selection narrative avoids the term aesthetic, but instead envisions that females select males for their genetic quality. Mating rituals are interpreted as ways by which a male can advertise his good genes. According to social selection, female choice focuses on whether a male is likely to deliver on promises to provide food and/or protection. Both males and females choose each other because the offspring represent a common investment in which both have a shared interest. Male genetic quality. According to sexual selection theory, males can be ranked in a hierarchy of genetic quality. Females seek males with good genes and avoid those with bad genes. However, it is impossible to maintain a polymorphism between good and bad genes in the face of continued directional selection against the bad genes. Hypothetically, if generation after generation female choice weeds out the males with bad genes, then eventually no bad genes remain. Therefore, sexual selection theorists concoct genetic schemes, typically involving high mutation rates spanning polygenic loci, to replenish the supply of bad genes that are being continually eliminated by female choice. The genetic dilemma of maintaining a hierarchy of genetic quality in the face of sustained selection against bad genes, this genetic dilemma is called the paradox of the Lek. This paradox is a fatal flaw in sexual selection theory. According to social selection, no hierarchy of genetic quality exists among males. All males are equivalent in genetic quality, excepting for a very rare fraction who obviously contain deleterious mutations and are present in a mutation selection balance, say 1 in a million. The classic chestnuts. Surely you may be thinking, a critique of sexual selection must be overlooking a wealth of evidence in its favor. Indeed, a wealth of studies do claim to support sexual selection, but drilling down to the data often reveals uncertainty and doubt. Take the peacock-peahen case. A 2008 study found, quote, no evidence that peahens expressed any preference for peacocks with more elaborate trains, similar to other studies of galliforms showing that females disregard male plumage. Our findings indicate that the peacock's train, still quoting, 1, is not the universal target of female choice, 2, shows a small variance among males across populations, and 3, based on current physiological knowledge, does not appear to reliably reflect the male condition. Instead, the study proposes that, quote, there has been selection on females for dull-colored plumage, as would be expected in ground nesting species with little or no male parental care, where females suffer high predation risk during incubation. Thus, researchers on peacocks no longer consider the male's tail to be a derived specialization to attract females, but instead regard the female's lack of a tail to be the derived specialization to avoid predators. Next, take the Bateman principle. In 1948, Angus Bateman, a geneticist, presented an experiment with Drosophila melanogaster regarded as confirming the theory of sexual selection. Bateman reported that for a male, quote, fertility is seldom likely to be limited by sperm production, but rather by the number of inseminations or number of females available to him. He also claimed to find, quote, undiscriminating eagerness in males and discriminating passivity in females. Bateman further reported that male fitness, namely the number of eggs bearing the male's paternity, increased with the number of mates, whereas for females, fitness was independent of the number of mates beyond one. One male was sufficient to supply all the sperm needed to fertilize the eggs. Bateman's results, called Bateman's principle, are a cornerstone of sexual selection theory, widely cited in textbooks. But as one critique pointed out in 2005, quote, Bateman had no way of knowing how many times a female mated or with how many males because he did not conduct behavioral observations. Duh. Similarly, another critique in 2005 points out, quote, Bateman apparently made only casual observations of the actual behavior of his flies. Then in 2007, another critique of Bateman's work noted that, quote, his methods had flaws, including the elimination of genetic variants, sampling biases, miscalculations of fitness variances, statistical pseudo-replication, and selective presentation of data. We conclude that Bateman's results are unreliable, his conclusions questionable, and his observed variances similar to those expected under random mating, unquote. Although Bateman's observations are now discounted, a descriptive statistic he introduced is widely used. The Bateman gradient is the regression of reproductive success against numbers of matings. If the gradient is steep, each additional mate produces a large increase in reproductive yield. And if the gradient is different between the sexes, then increasing the number of mates matters more to one sex than the other. So in 2016, a paper appeared in Science Advances with the ambitious title, quote, Darwinian sex roles confirmed across the animal kingdom, that compared the Bateman gradients for males and females in 66 species. The authors conclude, quote, our findings provide the first comprehensive evidence that Darwin's concept of conventional sex roles is accurate and refute recent criticism of sexual selection theory. And he's referring to me. The authors found that most species had a higher Bateman gradient in males than females, but not all. Pipefish and seahorses, which are sex role reversed, have higher gradients in females than males, as discussed later in point number 18. Drilling into the article's supplementary material reveals that the bony fish as a group showed no difference in male and female gradients, consistent with the fact that in fish, males provide the parental care, if any. The group of 66 species does not include monogamous birds with little sexual dimorphism, such as albatrosses or penguins. One could assemble an alternative set of 66 species with different results. Moreover, the behavior of the 66 species is not reported. So no one knows whether the behavior actually consists of undiscriminating eager males and discriminating passive females. What the study shows is simply that more species have males with a higher Bateman gradient than that of females. But we already know that because we already know that sex role reversed species are less common than non-sex role reversed species. In short, the authors overgeneralize their own data, do not explain the exceptions, and come nowhere close to confirming Darwinian sex roles across the animal kingdom. How to model social behavior. Sexual selection models social outcomes as a population genetic counterpart of the Nash competitive equilibrium, called an evolutionarily stable strategy, a situation in which, for both players, such that a mutant allele for any other strategy cannot increase when rare. This is a game theory concept of competitive equilibrium. Social selection models behavior as resulting from dynamics in two tiers, a developmental tier nested within an evolutionary tier. The developmental tier employs both cooperative and competitive game theory, resulting in either a Nash bargaining solution or a Nash competitive equilibrium. The evolutionary tier consists of game theoretic payoff matrices and rules of play that evolve based on traditional population genetic dynamics. Parental investment. According to sexual selection, the female has a higher parental investment than the male because the egg is bigger than the sperm. According to social selection, male and female parental investments are approximately the same initially. An ejaculate might contain 10 to the 6 sperm, whereas an egg is typically 10 to the 6 times as large as a sperm. So the size of the ejaculate and the egg are often about the same order of magnitude. Sexual conflict and cooperation. According to sexual selection, a male and female are fundamentally in conflict, and their cooperation is a possible, although unlikely, secondary development. Sexual selection postulates conflict between the male and female over how much each should invest in the young. In avian biparental care of nestlings, for example, sexual selection predicts that each bird is trying to get the other to do most of the work. If one bird happens to generously feed the nestling with an extra worm, the other is supposed to reduce the number of worms it supplies and use the saved energy to seek extra mating somewhere else. But experiments show that birds tending a common nest do not take advantage of each other in this way. According to social selection, male and female mates begin with a cooperative relationship because they have committed themselves to a common bank account of evolutionary success. Their offspring represent indivisible earnings from a common investment. Hurting the other hurts oneself. Helping the other helps oneself in terms of numbers of offspring successfully reared. As such, conflict develops only secondarily if a division of labor cannot be successfully negotiated. Male promiscuity. According to sexual selection, males are universally promiscuous because sperm are cheap and eggs expensive. But it makes no sense for a male to abandon control of his reproductive destiny. According to social selection, male promiscuity is a strategy of last resort, when males are excluded from sharing control of offspring rearing. Thereupon, the only strategy remaining is to fertilize as many females as possible. Monogamy. In sexual selection theory, monogamy violates the dictate that males should be promiscuous. Therefore, sexual selection explains away monogamous pair bonds as entrapment of males by females, or as a default when no other mates are available. Social selection distinguishes two forms of monogamy: economic monogamy, an agreement to carry out the work of offspring rearing in teams of one male and one female, and genetic monogamy, an agreement not to mate outside the pair bond. Most monogamy is economic monogamy. It emerges where the work of offspring rearing is most effectively done in male-female teams rather than as solitary individuals or in teams of more than two individuals. Extra-pair parentage. Extra-pair paternity occurs when a male sires young in a nest other than the one where he is working with a female. An extra-pair maternity occurs when a female deposits eggs at a nest other than the one where she is working with a male. Both EPPs and EPMs result in extra-pair parentage. According to sexual selection, extra-pair parentage is cheating. The male is said to be, quote, cuckolded. Offspring of extra-pair parentage are illegitimate, and females who do not participate in extra-pair copulations are, quote, faithful. This judgmental terminology reflects the failure to distinguish between economic and genetic monogamy. EPPs are assumed to result from basic male promiscuity, whereas EPMs are described as sexual parasitism. According to social selection, extra-pair parentage reflects a system of genetic side payments that stabilizes the social arrangement of economic monogamy when the individuals differ in their capacities to contribute to the offspring rearing. Distributed parentage also spreads the risk of nest mortality across a network of nests, acting as a social insurance policy. Sex role reversal. Species in which the male is drab and the female showy, the reverse of the peacock-peahen comparison, directly contradict the Darwinian norm. Many species are known, from seahorse and pipefish to jacanas and birds. In sex role reverse species, the male is in short supply for mating relative to females because of, say, carrying and or tending the eggs. Hence, the females may compete with one another for access to males and become the showy sex, while the male remains drab. Sexual selection does not say why the male should happen to be the sex in short supply in such species. The very existence of sex role reversed species contradicts the basic tenet of sexual selection that sex roles can be traced to gamete size. Pipefish, seahorses, and jacana males, like all other males, by definition, produce tiny sperm, and yet nonetheless they are the sex in short supply. This is a fatal flaw in sexual selection theory. According to social selection, reversed sex roles are not problematic because sex roles are negotiated in local ecological situations. According to social selection, it is in the male's interest to secure some control of the eggs, thereby retaining some control over his evolutionary destiny. In some ecological circumstances, after negotiation, he might wind up doing more of the offspring rearing than the female, and if so, sex role reversal ensues. Gender multiplicity. Many species have multiple templates of males and females, and I term each template a gender. In a common pattern is the two male gender pattern. In species of fish, lizards, and birds, one gender of male has a large body size at reproductive age, but must survive several years to attain that size, while suffering a mortality risk. Once large, a male can command a territory and defend eggs laid in it. The other gender of males reaches reproductive age sooner, don't defend territories, and they fertilize eggs in the territories defended by the large males. The two genders are competitive. The large male chases the small one away when it attempts to fertilize the eggs in the territory he is defending. A three-male gender pattern also occurs in fish and birds, where the large male solicits the help of a medium-sized male. The pair of them together maintain the territory and participate in courtship. The large male allows the medium male to fertilize some of the eggs in the territory. The small male, meanwhile, remains competitor and fertilizes some of the eggs in spite of the large and medium male's attempts to chase it away. Furthermore, two or more genders of females may occur, laying different sizes of eggs and/or differing in aggressiveness. Species with multiple genders defy sexual selection theory's supposition of only one gender per sex. Therefore, sexual selection is augmented with additional narratives. According to sexual selection, the large territory holding male is taken as the reference male, and the other types of males are considered as, quote, alternative mating strategies, unquote, and defined as sexual parasites. A pejorative language masquerades as description. The small, non-territory holding male is termed a sneaker who steals copulations that rightfully belong to the territory holding male. Calling the non-reference males pejorative names fosters a theoretically biased research. Time and again, the word sneaker, when uttered by a teacher or researcher, is accompanied by snickering and guffaws from students and audience. This research culture chills innovative inquiry and camouflages locker room banter as science. In contrast, sexual selection defines a quote, reproductive social group, unquote, that extends economic theory for an elemental male-female economic team to a larger team with more social niches. A reproductive social group subsumes the concept of a family, which is a reproductive social group whose members happen to be genetically related. In a reproductive social group, some members are pre-zygotic helpers, animals that assist in bringing about courtship and mating, together with post-zygotic helpers, members who remain at the nest to help rear the offspring that have already been born. Those not included in the reproductive social group's coalition form other arrangements to oppose it, either singly or in coalitions of their own. In this conceptualization, coalitions may form containing medium-sized males who assist in recruiting females to the nests of the large males who are guarding the eggs. A large male, medium male, and female coalition may then be opposed by a small male coalition that competes to fertilize eggs. Feminine males. In species with multiple male genders, one of the morphs often has colors shared with females. I term these as feminine males. Sexual selection theory refers to them as female mimics, sexual parasites who steal the reproductive investment of territory-holding males through deceit. A female mimic fools the territory-holding male and then surreptitiously enters his territory and mates with his females. The concept of mimicry is borrowed from predator-prey interactions. A Batesian mimic is a fly that resembles a bumblebee to avoid predation. The resemblance in Batesian mimicry is exact. one must look through a magnifying glass to discern that a mimic is really a fly and not a bee. In contrast, the resemblance between a feminine male and a female is always far from perfect, and the territory-holding male always has a long time for inspection. The feminine male in the bluegill sunfish, for example, is solicited to join the territory-holding male through a long courtship ritual. Moreover, the behavior of the territory-holding male to feminine males is never identical to that toward females, indicating that the territory-holding male is well aware of the difference between them. The concept of a female mimic is another locker room fantasy of sexual selection theorists, a guy fooled by a drag queen at a bar. Indeed, some sexual selection workers even borrowed the phrase she-male from pornography to describe the feminine male territorial male courtship in garter snakes. According to social selection, markings and colors on animals represent body English, how animals tell one another what their social role is, what their intentions are, and what activities they promise to perform. The markings and colors indicate an occupation, like a work uniform does in humans. Feminine males are participating in a conversation with words used more frequently by females than by territory-holding males. Through their courtship, a feminine male is hired by the territory-holding male to assist in recruiting females to lay eggs in his territory. The feminine male is a marriage broker who uses his feminine markings to attract and communicate with females. He can communicate that it's okay to trust her eggs to the territory-holding male, to trust that the territory-holding male will not abandon the eggs she leaves there. Human brain. Evolutionary psychologists have uncritically swallowed sexual selection theory hook, line, and sinker. Sexual selection theorists posit the human brain as a counterpart of the peacock's tail, an ornament used by men to attract women. One imagines a man using his big brain to compose lovely sonnets to woo his mate. The problem then is to explain why women have brains. I'm not making this up. So, sexual selection theorists postulate that females have brains to appreciate the brains of men. Only big-brained women can appreciate the sonnets of big-brained men. Social selection views the human brain as needed to participate in the social infrastructure within which offspring are reared. Such a trait is equally necessary in both men and women. Human rape. Sexual selection views human rape as an evolutionary strategy whereby men who are not preferred as mates by women manage to reproduce through coercion. Social selection views human rape as domination, an exercise of power that can be either homosexual or heterosexual, and that has little relation to reproduction. This talk presents two alternative sex-gender systems: sexual selection that emphasizes mating, and social selection that emphasizes the social system from which offspring are delivered to the next generation. In summary, I rank the top 3 fatal problems with sexual selection as 1, the paradox of the Lek that rules out a hierarchy of genetic quality in males; 2, sex role reversal that rules out a link between the sperm-egg size difference and sex roles; and 3, sexual selection's inadequacy to address sexual diversity beyond a heterosexual binary, necessitating implausible workarounds. More generally, the terms of discourse in the sexual selection system are selfishness, competition, conflict, coercion, ownership, and deceit. The sexual selection system underwrites genetic classism by naturalizing a mythical urge by females to sleep with genetic royalty who have the best genes. Sexual selection is a narrative of genetic entitlement, and it amounts to a political program. In contrast, the terms of discourse in the social selection system are negotiation, teamwork, and the division of labor. Now, if the sexual selection system is indeed true, then so be it. Alternatively, if sexual selection is not true, it should not be left to die in secret, but should be explicitly discredited, lest sexual selection linger as an obstacle to social justice. I have 4 slides, extra slides, and they are pictures, because you may not be familiar with all these phenomena. So this is an illustration of gender multiplicity, in case you're not familiar with this phenomenon, if you haven't seen it before. So these pictures are ruffs, a European shorebird species with 3 male genders and 1 female gender. Now the left panel shows the male gender with a dark ruff. You can think of it as like a collar around its neck, a ruff. The top middle panel shows the male gender with a white ruff, and the top right panel shows the male gender with no ruff. The bottom middle panel shows the female, which also has no ruff. And the lower right illustrates a black ruffed male mating with a ruffless male. So that's a homosexual and heterogenderal mating. Now this is one. So ruffs, just to explain this here, ruffs mate in leks. Now a lek is a place where males congregate to attract females. It's sort of the flip side of a red light district. And black ruffed males defend little courts within the lek, within which each displays the visiting females. Now, the white ruffed males do not defend courts, but instead they hang out. They keep company with the females as the females are feeding. So the feeding flocks will then have the females and the white ruffed males. And when a white ruffed male is nearby, if he comes to the vicinity of the lek, and a black ruffed male is all alone on the lek, the black ruffed male dances to invite the white ruffed male to join him on his court. So there's then a pair of them, of males in the court, one black, one white ruffed. And then the females who arrive later at the lek prefer to mate with a black-white team of males rather than with only a black-white, than a black ruffed males. And so in this case, the white ruffed male is acting as the marriage broker because he then had fed with and been in the company of the females while they were foraging. And I don't know what the function of the unruffed male is. That wasn't reported. Now this slide, which was also in the movie, shows the one I took in 2018 in a visit to South Africa and illustrates 2 male elephants mating. Charismatic megavertebrates often feature same-sex mating, as do over 100 species of birds. Now this slide, the reason I'm showing this is that this shows male-male mating in rams up in the upper left corner. And then the sequence at the top right was given to me by a Brazilian photojournalist. They show one male lion soliciting a mating from another male lion and then proceeding to a male-male mating. You can just see the solicitation going on here. And then they mate. And then they hang out. And the bottom two show same-sex mating in lions occurring in the presence of a female. So they're not doing this because they can't find a female, which is a common narrative. And this is the last one. I hope I didn't skip over a slide, because did I skipped over a slide about homosexuality? Well,
You said it in elephants, you said it in lions.
yeah, no, would have been earlier. I'll come back to this in just a second. Oh, here we go. I accidentally skipped over this slide for some reason. So in homosexuality, again, in the contrast between social selection and sexual selection, most people think that homosexuality is unnatural and rare. Yet even 20 years ago, over 300 species were reported in peer-reviewed literature that document natural homosexuality in birds and mammals, and many more have been published since then. In some species, homosexuality is mostly about males, in others, mostly about females, and in others, both. In some, homosexuality is relatively common, occurring about 10% of the matings, and in others as common as heterosexual matings. And you saw that in the bonobos, where it's extremely common, maybe even more common than heterosexual matings. According to sexual selection, homosexuality involves deceit. A small male sneaks into the territory of a large male, allows the large male to tire by acquiescing to homosexual copulation, then proceeds to mate with the females in the large male's harem. Such narratives credit the behavior as natural and adaptive to one of the participants, but view it in the pejorative light of exploitation. The gay animal has exploited the straight animal. Other narratives portray homosexuality as a genetic defect, maladaptive disease, or a disease caused by genes that decrease the fitness in one sex but increase the fitness in the other sex, called sexually antagonistic pleiotropy. Now, according to social selection, not only is homosexuality natural and adaptive, but it contributes positively to both parties. Homosexuality is grouped with many affiliative social behaviors that involve physical intimacy, such as mutual grooming, mutual preening, sleeping together, rubbing tongues together, and making interlocking calls and other vocalizations, as well as excess heterosexual mating. These behaviors lead to a mutual exchange of physical pleasure. Theoretical interest lies with the entire class of mutually affiliative behaviors, not solely same-sex mating. Now, these affiliative behaviors allow animals to work together as a team, to closely coordinate their actions so they make moves simultaneously. Furthermore, these behaviors allow animals a tactile sense of one another's welfare. Teamwork depends not only on coordinated activity, but also on the pursuit of a common goal, a goal of joint welfare that is the product of the fitness of the cooperating individuals. In social selection, the outcomes of cooperative game theory are realized through team play together with the perception of team welfare. Homosexuality is merely one of the many physically intimate behaviors between animals that enables teamwork. Moreover, the act of cooperation itself has evolved to be pleasurable, as exemplified by the shared joy of throwing a touchdown, kicking a goal, or sinking a basket in human team sports. So then this last slide right here is just an example of all the different kinds of affiliative behaviors that animals have, all of which involve the mutual exchange of pleasure. And so I don't see any reason to separate out the mutual exchange of pleasure through same-sex sexuality from all the rest. because it seems to have the same overall function in my view. So there we are. Thank you.